Learn how to deliver real-time data solutions to save money and increase profitability. Winning with Patrick Emokpae, CEO of Fluid Insight, on today's episode of the Executive Wins Podcast. Welcome to the Executive Wins Podcast, where senior leaders share their biggest wins so you can get inspired and grow your business. Here's your host, Gordon Shepherd. Welcome to the Executive Wins Podcast, where senior leaders share their biggest wins so that you can get inspired and grow your business. I'm your host, Gordon Shepherd. And to kick things off, I want to share an important leadership lesson that I learned from Jesse Hill, CEO of Tier 3 IT Solutions, on episode 51. You see, Jesse and his team invested in cyber attack simulation training as part of their own readiness approach. It took a lot of time and money, but it paid off big time when a real cyber attack occurred in 2021 that affected millions of businesses around the world, including his clients. The simulation training included knowing who does what when an incident occurs, who to contact in other jurisdictions to get real-time feedback, and it even helped him and his team to be prepared to eat properly and get enough sleep during a couple of 100-hour weeks. The lesson for leaders? Well, be prepared. And that is just one lesson that you'll learn from over 50 leaders who have already appeared on this show, which is why I really recommend that you go back and check out every episode in the archive. Another reason to listen? Well, the Executive Wins Podcast won the Best New Podcast Award in the Quill Podcasting Awards in its first year of production. And thanks to you, the Executive Wins Podcast has surpassed 37,000 views on YouTube and more than 19,000 minutes of watch time, along with having over 1,500 downloads on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen. Featuring mission-driven leaders sharing their biggest wins so that you can get inspired and grow your business. That's what you get on the Executive Wins Podcast. On today's episode, you'll learn how to deliver real-time data solutions to save money and increase profitability. Winning with Patrick Emokpae, CEO of Fluid Insight. I also want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by our new workshop called How Leaders Can Tell Winning Stories to Get Profitable Results. This workshop helps leaders learn how to tell highly effective stories so they can inspire their teams and customers to get more profitable results. In this hands-on workshop, leaders will learn a proven 5-step storytelling system called the Anatomy of a Win, so they can articulate the strategy, work plan, people, operations, and results behind every winning story they want to tell. They'll also learn how to dynamically use their voice and be confident storytellers no matter where they are, at the office, networking events, in the boardroom, or on stage. So if you and your leadership team really want to learn how to tell winning stories to get more profitable results, then get in touch with me directly at gord@executivewins.com or visit executivewins.com/Executive Wins Storytelling Workshop to learn more. And now on to today's show. We are lucky to be joined by Patrick Emokpae, CEO of Fluid Insight, a company that delivers real-time data solutions that save clients money and also make them more profitable in major sectors, including mining. You can learn about their work at fluid-insight.com. That's fluid-insight.com. On this episode, you'll learn how Patrick and his team saved a mining company $19 million by providing real-time fluid insights that help that company manage oil changes on heavy equipment in a more efficient manner. You'll also hear about Patrick's positive attitude as an entrepreneur and how he leveraged his core value, which is lifelong learning, to take a very intentional approach to setting up his company. This episode is must listen for any leader who really wants to learn how to develop a well rounded set of skills so they can innovate, raise capital, and solve real world problems. I also want to remind you that this interview follows a specific format that I created called The Anatomy of a Win to help you learn the strategy, work plan, people, operations, and results behind every business win that you hear on this show. I really do hope that you can use this approach to reach your next business milestone. And now here's Patrick Emokpae with his executive win. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Well, it is just so lucky to have you here. I really appreciate that you've taken the time because when I think about terms that I don't even understand, like data lakes or optimize my mining fleet, and I know that I've got the right person in front of me who's going to, does that and way more because I saw United Way in there in the background. So there's history, there's dad, there's all those different things that you bring to the table. And we're going to learn about one of your biggest wins here today. But there's probably a lot of people that haven't met you just yet. So if you had to introduce yourself, what would you say?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. So Patrick Emokpae, if I was to introduce myself, it would be I am the founder and creator of Fluid Insight. And I'm really blessed because I wouldn't say rare, but I'm a fortunate person that gets to do what they were born to do for a living. And that is a double-edged sword, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Born to do. What does that mean?
Everything in my personality and almost everything that I've experienced has led me, like anybody else, has led me to this point. But a lot of people life takes them in a certain direction and they end up accountants or they end up teachers or 1,000 other things. And those are great things. But I find in my experience, it's really rare that people are doing what they really have a passion for, what they were truly meant to do. And I think that's one of the things with entrepreneurs is that typically people don't, well, I shouldn't say that. People sometimes do fall into being entrepreneurs, but a lot of entrepreneurs that are really passionate about what they do it. It's because that's what they were meant to do. It lines up with their personality, the opportunities, the background, all of those other things.
So you're passionate about something. What is it that you're
Yes.
passionate about?
I have an addiction. And so my particular addiction is learning. And so I found that out really early. I love learning things. And I think one of the things that's great about having your own company is that, especially with the type of company that Fluid Insight is, there's a lot of different disciplines that are part of the mix. And so you're constantly learning about everything and also how these different things connect. And so it's beautiful. There's analytical chemistry, there's machine learning, there's mechanical engineering, there's all these other things that mix together. And so, at least for me, I'm constantly in learning mode. And you can never get to the point where you think, oh yeah, I've got this figured out, because that's when something jumps up and bites you in the butt.
So your passion is learning. You get to implement that every day in your entrepreneurial career. You were a founder in 2014. I was reading up on that. And so you've been able to
Yeah.
be in business for over a decade doing your thing. I need to
Yes.
back up a little bit and give me just a bullet point highlights of maybe start me off with the education, just highlights, and take me through what led to founding your own company in 2014.
Definitely. So nothing very little in my educational background would have led me to where I am now. So I majored in business and management, and the entire idea for me was that no matter what, the last thing I would ever want to do is to be an entrepreneur. It's going to sound funny. What I wanted more than anything was to work for a really large organization and work my way up. And they say be careful what you wish for. And so, not too long out of college, I got a job with the Alberta government in the corporate tax department. And then I realized that that just didn't meld with my personality and who I was. And yeah, it took about 8 years to finally realize, nah, it's not the best fit. Immovable object, irresistible force. But I learned enough there that I was able to take some of what I learned, started a consulting firm, and then it was around 2014, I thought, yeah, the consulting side is coming to an end, but there's this newfangled thing called machine learning and artificial intelligence. And again, this is 2014 before it's being used in every other sentence. And I thought that I could apply that to some of what my clients in oil and gas and mining were doing. And that was the dawn of Fluid Insight.
And there's the dawn. So you're a lifelong learner. You're an adaptive learner. It's not like you went to sort of computer school and learned all that part of things. But in fact, that may be a useless skill anyway, because things change so fast
So
these days,
fast.
right? So now what you're talking about is you're the adaptive learner, which is the ideal. I'm hearing that from other educators these days, that's the ideal. I'm going to say somewhere in there's maybe not always positive mindset, but there's the mindset to learn and adapt and then find a problem. So you're already working with the clients. You
Yeah.
knew they had some trouble. You knew that you could apply it as sort of in pioneering days, if that's 10 years ago,
Yeah.
for AI applications. And we still know that I'd be surprised if it's 20% of companies that are uptaking AI in an
Yeah.
actually productive way across the country. And I'm not trying to dig into stats. I'm just talking about things I've learned at conferences over time, but it's not the majority of people. So you're on that moment where then you can assemble a team, because you mentioned the chemistry, and I saw again from your team, you've got sort of that in place. You've got other sort of,
Yeah.
you can put the geniuses in place in your company to problem solve for companies. And give me an example of something cool that your company did for another company.
Yeah, absolutely. So the to give everybody some context. So what Fluid Insight is we take the same kind of insight that you would get from a lab, and that process involves manual sampling. You label that sample, you send it to a lab, you wait days, weeks for the results. You look at those results, and then you say, "Oh, that's what was going on." And then retroactively, you go back and make decisions or you draw inferences. And so with our solution, it's all of that information in real time. So the tip of the spear is our inline sensor chemistry, and that marries up with our machine learning. And so when you
And
talk about some,
I'm just gonna jump in and make it real
sure.
for my tiny brain, which is this idea of I've invested how much in one of those heavy haul trucks if I'm in an open mining operation in Fort. How much are those trucks worth?
Those trucks, the 797 Caterpillar, anywhere from 9.7 to $10 million, depending on the
So I've got a
bells and
$10 million
whistles you get.
truck, and I used to send it away for my oil change or whatever, and I'm saying that badly, but you know what I mean? I
No,
had
no,
to get some fluids monitored, and it took me a month to get those results back. But in the meantime, I'm running that truck 24/7 or whatever I do to make that thing go. And you came along with a solution and said, no, we can do that in real time. Now, if I'm running that truck and
yeah.
I'm trying to cost that out because I work in the accounting department,
Mhm.
I'm going to say, wait a second, I get that real time information. How much did I save by implementing your process? Or how much did I gain? What did I gain from
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. And I love that question because there's a lot of different vectors where our clients gain. So one of them is on, let's call it the cost side. So for one of those haul trucks, an oil change, just really, really basic thing between lubricants, labor, ancillary maintenance activities is running you around $20,000. That's a lot. Then the other side of that is the lost revenue. So the idea is that it doesn't matter what it is, and our solution can apply to anything, but haul trucks are a really great entry point. When that thing is down for an oil change, let's say the 8 hours that that's going to take, you're losing money. And so for, let's say, a big, big company, that can be, depending on what exactly is they're mining, anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000 an hour. So you're losing on one side of the equation, and then you're losing revenue on the other side of the equation. And what a lot of companies do, and this actually goes back over to 1955, they'll take a manual sample, started in the rail industry, they'll send it to a lab, all those other things. So between now and 1955, when that started, we've sent people to the moon, we've developed the internet, we've done all these other things. But the majority of companies in the world, whether it's data centers, mining companies, rail companies, water treatment facilities, they're still doing things the way they did in 1955. And so the entire idea is that now, one, you can figure out, okay, is my fluid at a point where it needs to be changed? And again, that can be in a bulldozer, a mining haul truck. It could be in a race car. It could be in a data center. It could be literally anywhere. But then with our process, what we also do, and it's what sets us apart, before we install our sensors, we build machine learning algorithms for that specific fluid and that specific fluid's chemistry. And then from there, what we're able to do is we're able to say, this is what this fluid looks like with, let's say, 0.01% of this particular coolant, or with this much diesel dilution. Or, oh my gosh, someone made a mistake. They switched up the hose, and now we've got the wrong thing about to go into something.
So we're getting this real-time insights. We're moving away from the 1950s, which is a
Yeah.
funny process because there's profitability built into that in certain industries. And you're
Mhm.
trying to then break through to those industries to sell into those people that are maybe used to doing things a certain way. We've had people on this show that are in the home building industry.
Mm.
There's a fellow named James Kierstead, builds a wireless light switch because the guy's making prefab walls. And that's an awesome idea. They get it into 7 homes in Calgary in 2015. And an inspector comes along and shuts down the whole thing. Takes 7 years to get the regs to break.
Oh.
So there's a regulatory lag. So you're dealing with all those different things. But in the meantime, what I'm hearing is Fluid Insights with your leadership, in a sense, and then your team is able to go into anything with fluid that
Yeah.
moves. Put your box in there. I'm going to say that badly, but it monitors, it sends data. The concept of data lake, which I'm really interested in, I'm just going to say it badly on your behalf and say you can crunch a lot of data
Yeah.
and get it to get a result that then does the practical things that you mentioned earlier, which is this idea of saving on things they're not even realizing. Because now I can hear you drawing back to your consulting days in a sense where you're then pulling together the full cost benefit analysis
Yeah.
for what these people are going to get. How lucky to have you almost bolted in as a partner if I'm in the
Yeah.
maintenance game. And I'm just describing now one sliver of your business, of which I think there's probably multiple different things. I know on your website we saw different products, and I don't mean to, I wish we had sort of all day in a sense to
Yeah.
interview you to hear them all, because I can hear you're a thinker and you'll have, if I talk to you in a year, there would be another offering and another offering simply because of the expertise that you're building up. But right now we know you solve these fluid issues in a way that is today, in a way
Mhm.
that gets down to micro measurements and efficiency that maybe is unprecedented in the industry, or you know what
Yeah.
I mean? There wouldn't be many people that are thinking in this way and doing it in this way. And you're in market, right? You're actually getting it's on, you're getting it done and it's happening. So I just think congratulations. That's a lot of
Thank you.
tenacity to get to this level. And thank you for the simple explanations for my little brain, as you probably could talk chemistry and data analysis all day long.
I
One of the
couldn't
moments I like to
do.
get to in the interview that I like to say now is, if you had to describe your biggest win in this
Mm.
work over this decade or longer or whatever it is, what would that win be, and how would you describe it?
The biggest win, literally, it was in the mining industry. So mining is one of the most difficult, and mining in northern Alberta specifically, in the oil sands, is considered one of the harshest environments on the planet Earth to install sensors. There are so many different challenges. You have a haul truck, for example. It carries 4.5 million pounds. It goes through vibration that you can't simulate anywhere. You're dealing with all of these factors in terms of complex chemistry and additive packages and everything else. And so the biggest win was actually being able to install our solution in a couple of mining trucks, and then being able to see that data streaming live. But then beyond that, being able to see, hey, you know what? They were normally changing, let's say, at 250 hours for this type of asset or 500 hours for this. But now the client's vision in terms of moving towards condition-based changes, they were actually able to implement that even only on our limited project run. It was done deliberately on 2 assets. They're able to say, based on this, we know that changing it at 500 hours doesn't make sense because this 500 hours might be different from 500 hours 2 weeks from now. And we can see based on the chemistry of the lubricant right now that it doesn't need to be changed. And so then being able to extrapolate that out confidently to the rest of their fleet and saying, we know we could probably even stretch it longer, but making a change on a certain set of assets, the big haul trucks, from 500 hours to 750 doesn't seem like much, but between their savings and their expanded revenue, that added up to about $19 million a year for them. That, for me, was a really big win because it brought together so many disparate things, but in a way that had real world value.
I love it. And thank you for describing it in that way, because it breaks it down to something that's quite real. There's a couple things that come to mind. One, I've seen a Suncor executive say, you know what we're in the business of? We save cost and we're safety. That's their thing.
Yeah.
And that's their, it was just such a simple way to say a
Yeah.
complex concept, but that's a huge, huge win for them. I'm also feeling helpless when I'm getting my oil change now at Jiffy Lube because I want your technology in there, because I have no idea what the guys, and I don't even know if he put synthetic in. I hope he did, is that kind of thing. But this is lovely because you've actually then taken your business sense, gotten into their world, found a real world problem that they're dealing with, and then in your first implementation to save somebody $19 million. I mean, you can't get a better case study or an ad in a
A
sense for
year.
what you're doing. Is
Yeah,
that fair?
exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I love about the mining industry, it's not an easy industry to get into, but it's one of those industries where, hey, if this works, we'll give it a chance here and there. And so even when I think about what we're able to do, we have a client in Tennessee. They're never going to see minus 40 degrees Celsius. They're an underground mine, more so than our current clients. But the great thing is they could easily extrapolate what we're doing. And then they said, this is great to have on our mobile assets, but we've got these massive mills, hydraulic systems, where if they go down, the entire mining operation shuts down with it. And it was neat to hear from them. They said, so Patrick, put aside everything you're doing with the mobile assets. They said, for us, even if we have these mills that shut down because they're old hydraulic systems, they shut down maybe once every 2 years. And when they go down for 3, 4 hours, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars an hour. They said, even if your solution only saves us that every, let's say 2, 3 years, it would have been, a 10x return on investment just because of that alone. And so they were finding other places where we could apply our solution.
So here we are jumping geographies now. You said we
Yeah.
started in the harshest climates, but then we ran down to Tennessee. And my guess is if somebody threw you on a private jet anywhere in the world, you would go in there and you would start to solution the scenario, especially with genius chemistry in the background. I'm going to
Yeah.
recap. The win is we went into one of the harshest environments. We were able to, in a situation where it's very difficult to get consistent, reliable data, to actually get that to happen with your, with what you guys installed. So that's the big win. Got
Yeah.
that started. We heard the end result of what that kind of win was. That's, well, congratulations. I always like to jump into
Thanks.
what I call the anatomy of a win to explore a win whenever we
Yeah.
hear about it. You set up this scenario in this extreme environment and it works. And
Yeah.
it saves them money. So that's super cool. What was the strategy, work plan, people, operations, and results behind the win? So strategically, when we talk about this from your point of view, vision, mission, values, goals, was there anything strategically highlight-wise that you like to point out for making this win occur?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was actually, and it's going to sound odd, I'm a really big believer in humility. You can't learn unless you have the humility to know that there's things you don't know. That's just the nature of learning. You start off not knowing something that you should find out. And so one of the things for me that was really great is a confluence of the values that we have at Fluid Insight, just understanding that one, our entire reason for being is to solve problems, but we have to do that with humility. I think, especially in the age of AI, we've accepted the fact that, oh, hey, there's something that can spit out an answer fast. And so we put a lot of cachet into that. But I think that can sometimes take us towards the wrong thing because sometimes it's not necessarily the fastest answer. Sometimes it's saying, I don't know, let me go find out. There's a vulnerability in saying, I don't know the answer right away. And so with this particular client, they had said, so Patrick, there's going to be things because no one's ever done this and your solution is unique that you're going to learn and that we're going to learn. And so we have no problem if there's little bumps in the road. And I thought, well, one of the guys that's helping us deploy these, he was involved in putting together the first Caterpillar truck in the oil sands decades ago. And we've got engineers from companies that build this that are helping us. It should be fun. They said, just so you know, that's great if everything works out. Don't expect it to. No plan survives first contact. There's going to be some bumps that you don't expect, but don't worry about it. We're just telling you that in advance. And so what was really great about that is, yeah, we did come across things that we couldn't have simulated in the lab, but they were amazing in terms of collaborating with us as a client, as opposed to, hey, this didn't go perfectly right out of the gate. Get your stuff off. That was really great because it felt like our corporate cultures were meshing in terms of, hey, let's figure this out. Accept that not everything will go perfect right away, but we know what we're trying to get to. And so
One
that
of,
felt really great.
That's great. And one of the most important things we can do in our strategies is define what our values are. And
Yeah.
again, you said, wait a second, we took the time before you met these folks, you took the time to have the humility in there and what's going on. I can also hear your experience coming into this as well with again, the whole assembly of the team that you've got going here. That's great to see that strategic highlight. There would be more to it again if we talk longer, but I need to move on to anytime we have a strategy, we need a work plan. So at some
Yeah.
point, there's like a concept. If I go day one of the timeline, I'm like, you're lying in your bed, you're like, wow, I sure like fluid or whatever, whatever, you know what I mean? There's something going on where an inkling of an idea and then time to delivery. Let's say time to bolt it on that truck in a sense, or time to that 1 year pass. How long did it take from conception to
Mm.
implementation if you had to sort of look at the timeline?
When I look at the timeline, I'm a really big believer in iterative development. And so with the idea of you get to this point and then you leverage from there. But I came into it not knowing really anything about machine learning, not knowing anything about electrical engineering, about fluid chemistry. And so for me, the biggest thing to do was to learn all of that very quickly. And so I have a lot of friends that are professors in different disciplines, and I literally just started projects with them, not necessarily with the idea of I'm going to be implementing all of the, let's call it the purely academic vantage point that they had. I was looking to solve a practical problem, but I had to understand the fundamentals. And so from 2014 till, let's call it 2022, it was literally just iterative development, but it started with, yeah, understanding the basics of electrochemistry, understanding how that correlates with analytical chemistry, understanding, and for me, I think the biggest thing was understanding what I wanted the end result to look like and saying, if I work my way backwards from there, what are the different pieces that need to be filled in? I'm a really big believer in visualizing things. If you can visualize it, you can actualize it. And so having an idea of, okay, if I was the client, this is what I would want to see. And this is all fantastical stuff right now that's never been done. But if I start at the end and then work my way back, then as I'm getting there, that vision starts to crystallize and I can say, yeah, that's the experience that I wanted for the user. That's what I wanted to actualize.
I mean, this is remarkable. I mean, it's you meeting the challenge with your tenacity and resilience and give it 8 years. I can't tell you how often on the show I've met wonderful leaders from all over North America now. I hear 8 years, 10 years,
Yeah.
20 years. Like this is not snap your fingers and you're going to knock it out of the park in a year. I think
Yeah.
entrepreneurs fall into that trap a lot. We also heard another look into your strategy. You had a vision for what you wanted it to be at the end. And then you had some sort of interesting way to go about a sort of a regular process, which I think if we look at the peaks and valleys of 8 years, you got a family. Do you know what I mean? You got to come home
Yeah.
at night, right? What's it like to come home at night in the peaks and valleys of going through that timeline?
Oh gosh, let's talk about the valleys. I think one of the things Steve Jobs had once said that no rational person would ever start a business, right? And so, and again, I can only speak from my experience. The entrepreneurs that I know, there's always an element of irrational confidence that runs through them. And so it's in spite of all the evidence to the contrary, in spite of what they don't know, in spite of their lack of resources, assets, experience, no, they have this, and I think it starts with having that vision. They know they're going to get there. And so I'm really blessed. My family is incredibly supportive, and I was able to meet people that understood what our vision was from the standpoint of people that had lived the problem. So a lot of the investors that I have, and it took a lot of capital, they understood it because they had lived 3 in the morning. This piece of equipment that we were relying on to deliver for our clients went down. Or, oh yeah, well, we're changing the lubricant in this, but we probably know it doesn't need to because it's been idling for 80% of the week. And so that made a huge difference. And then in terms of the valleys, I try to stay as even keeled as possible. I find that makes a big difference. Just getting to the valleys, but always having the idea that, or getting to the peaks and understanding, okay, great, we had this breakthrough, or we learned this about the product market fit, or we learned this about how to frame the return on investment, or we, we're getting closer to these clients, but being able to be consistent through that and say, okay, that's great. things could change very suddenly. It's not real until there's money in the bank. And you keep pushing through, but with the idea that if things change either way, you want to stay as consistent as possible.
Wow. So here we are. So we've got a vision, we've got humility, we've got get started. And I'm going to sort of chunk away at sort of an experiment, but we know the end result because you're like, I think there's a problem. I'm going to work
Yeah.
backwards from solving that problem. It's a complex problem. It's not as simple. It's not like setting up an online store. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this is like you get after it from a really interesting academic perspective, but then you brought in a lot of people. I'm hearing investors in there as well. So we heard strategy and the work plan, a little bit about that timeline and whatever. There's always, anytime we have a win, we always have people involved.
Yeah.
I'm looking at someone with irrational confidence. I'm looking at
Yes.
someone who keeps it even keel. I'm looking at some, do you know what I mean? And then there's support in the family in terms of that. How would you describe your own attitude? It's 2014. How would you describe your own attitude throughout this process?
It's I I'm an eternal optimist, and I find if you have that as your default, it makes the tough days much, much easier to get through. But then also, and I and maybe this is me projecting, but I feel that passion is very contagious. If you're legitimately, authentically excited about what you're doing, even if other people have no connection to it, there's something irresistible about that person really believes in what they're doing. They're really getting after it. And even if they don't share the same background, people will, and it's one thing I love about Alberta's entrepreneurial ecosystem, people will go out of their way to try to help you, whether it's through introductions, whether it's through advice, all these other things. If they feel that, hey, I can connect to the energy and the authentic nature that that person is bringing to what they're trying to do day in, day out.
I think we get a really good sense of you throughout this, what we've heard so far. There's always other key people, and we can't list them all. Are there some other key players in here that you need to mention that were sort of significant along the way to making this a success?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. There's so many people. When I think about our core team, so our lead chemist, he's amazing. He has Kenny, he has a doctorate in analytical chemistry, and he's extremely rare in that he did his thesis, his doctoral thesis, on analytical or on electrochemistry, and specifically the kind of electrochemistry that we use. Did his undergraduate at Johns Hopkins. When I first saw his resume, I kid you not, Gord, I thought, I think this is one of my buddies catfishing me. There's no way that this person's real. He's just, right, does not seem like a real person. Our senior software engineer, Peter, he's amazing at what he does. He's a full stack developer, but what makes him unique is that for the early part of his career and throughout his career, it's been based on deploying sensors to remote isolated areas. And so it's one thing to be able to say, in a cubicle, yeah, this will work. It's another thing to have someone say, okay, but keep in mind, this is going onto a drilling rig, or we're collecting telemetry from literally the edge of Rogers' network, or all these other things. And so that makes a huge difference because it's expertise that's rooted in experience and in a very practical. Alberta's a great proving ground for any technology. Then when I think about our consulting chief data scientist, MIT graduate, and it's great because she really understands what we do, in large part because her first degree focused on fluid dynamics. And so again, saw this person's resume and I thought, I'm not sure if this is a real resume or one just, yeah, yeah.
So here we are putting together this dream team, including having sort of a not even a player manager. You're like a manager GM or whatever it is that's sort of in the situation and able to manage these people along the way. But you have these geniuses that you've been able to accumulate in their lanes that then accumulate together to come up with solutioning along the way. I don't mean to get into the whole thing, just
Mhm.
given the nature of our thing, but I also hear that you can raise money. And I don't mean to get into numbers or whatever it is, but you have the ability to raise money. You had the ability to reach um, insightful smart investors. This is
Mhm.
not, these are people that understand the money they're deploying. You're helping them to deploy. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is. And this isn't me being a self-deprecating Canadian, but that's one of the things where I'm learning more each day. That's the best way to put it. The investors that we have they really understood what we were doing from the standpoint of practitioners. But then there's a different skill set where people are able to raise institutional money. And so that's something that I'm learning about more and more.
Yeah, incredible. So here we are. It's 2014. You're going to start something. You get the dream team together, or sorry, even before that, you're doing your experiments, whatever. You got your own
Yeah.
lab, whatever you want to call it, petri
Mhm.
dish in the world to do your thing, and then you get all these people that are onboarding, including some people that you don't even believe are real, but they show up in your world and they're very real because now
Yeah.
you're out there in the world. This is happening, and that's good. We could go on and talk about the other people involved, I'm sure, but that's a really good insight into some of the people that were involved in this win. The fourth step in the anatomy of a win is operational exploration. So when we look at it, you've built a box. It goes into a machine. There's software that was built and
Yeah.
deployed. Oh, there we go. Yeah. And holding it up for us, right? So this is the thing that if I had if I had fluids running through something, you would bolt this in there, and it would be the sensor that does the thing. Is that fair?
Exactly. And so, humility is such a huge thing. So the typically what you see for a lot of sensors that will, let's say, look at fluid condition or temperature or pressure, it looks more like a cylindrical probe. My old man was a heavy duty mechanic and he taught it. And so one of the things that I realized really early is that it doesn't matter how fancy it is, how well it works in the lab, if the guy that or lady that has to install this at 2 in the morning when it's minus 40 out is inconvenienced in any way, or they think, this is just another thing, no matter what the CEO wants, no matter what the board of directors want, it won't go. And so we designed it, one, to be as easy as possible to install. The fluid flows through. We build the algorithms for that specific fluid before we install the sensors. But then this is also the manifold and the sensor as one piece. So this could go onto a space shuttle or it could go into a water treatment facility. It's the exact same thing. And it's designed so that anybody at that company can easily install it, which then moves us away from being a logistics company that has to send out armies of people to install, and the install is different each time, to nope, it's just one solid thing. And then for the client, it's one space shuttle. Hey, we know that our fuel is fine. We're going to manually sample maybe every 4 hours before it gets to that craft. Or a data center. Is this glycol contaminated? Nope, all of that's taken care of, and it was easy to install. So there's one less major barrier to implementation.
I could hear you all over every step of this. It's really interesting because you're the integrator. Do you know what I mean? You're that curious lifelong learner and problem solver who is then taking in all factors as opposed to, and you're drawing on so many different sources to make that occur. So we know that there's operationally, an invention IP sort of scenario that you've got going in play. It's been implemented, and it's again, so sorry. It's a really cool box that companies
Thank you.
love because it saves them tens of millions of dollars because once they get it in, and you actually also dealt with the fact that your dad's experience lets you know what's going to happen to really get this implemented because you know the company cultures better than they know themselves to actually get this thing to go. And that's another problem that's out there in that problem solving chain of problems that you need to solve along the way. Love it. This is so good. And then operationally, again, I don't mean to get into the whole meal deal
Mhm.
other than there's genius. You said we install the customized algorithms. We know how to use the AI. We know the chemistry because we've got the brilliant chemist involved there. You've pulled together all of the operational elements that kind of make this work, and it allows that data to come back. And then we've already heard the real world applications, some of them that you're able to do in all these different settings wherever there are fluids sort of getting going forward. Love it. So we've heard
Yeah.
strategy, work plan, people, operations. Finally, there's results, quantitative and qualitative results. Quantitatively, 19 million saved for one company. Quantitatively, save me a couple $100,000 every couple of years. We're good to go in Tennessee, but where there's probably even more to it than that. Any other quantitative sort of highlights that you like to point out for this win?
Yeah, yeah. It was interesting because even in this first deployment, one of the things we were able to do is we were able to highlight it was a so our solution can be deployed in assets, but we can also deploy it through the supply chain. And so one of the things that's great about that, if let's say you're talking about lubricants, it could be directly from the lubricant manufacturer. It could be in the lubricant totes that they get their lubricants from. It could be in all these other places. And so one of the things was really great about this is within our process, we build the algorithms using the actual fluids that the company uses. And so with one particular client, when we got their lubricants as part of their process, we ran it through our platform, and then we realized, okay, you know what? Uh, yes, it's great that we can classify this lubricant and we can identify it, but we can see that there's actually a problem with it. There was a massive amount of water contamination. And so we said to the client, okay, hold on, that particular tote, it seems that there's an issue in it. There's a massive amount of water contamination. Don't use that lubricant in anything. Here's our results. And then to correspond with that, here's the results from an independent lab. And when we walk through the process, here's some things that might have happened from a process standpoint, either from the manufacturer internally, that would have led to that. And it was the type of problem that was systematic. And so they wouldn't have necessarily traced it back to a lubricant tote in a non-operations area, but it was
Quantitatively, I'm just gonna
yeah.
jump in here and say quantitatively, you were able to jump into a situation and see not they were looking for your solution, but then you were able to actually look into their world and say, wait, you might be using the wrong product or the wrong mix or whatever that
There was an
is.
issue with, yeah, and how this product was being secured. And it would have been one of those things that it would have just spread. So month after month, they would have had a couple more engines than normal go down, and they would have assumed that it was because of operations,
And how
not,
nice that you've got
yeah.
the values set to identify that for them. Because you probably could have installed your box and ran along with it or whatever. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And whatever. But in the meantime, you were ethically saying, wait a second, before we even get started here, there's a problem. And again, it reflects back to the whole sort of continuity that I've heard along the way. We're saving money. We're advising clients before we even get started on the quantitative side. For results qualitatively, how's this all feel?
It feels great, and it feels very validating more than anything. One of the things that I love about what I do is that almost there's never a situation where I have a conversation with a potential client, someone that I'm just introducing to Fluid Insight, to an investor, whoever, and they'll almost always come up with use cases that I hadn't thought of. And so it's great because it feels, and not feels, but it really is one of those things where I could think of 1,000 different applications. And then tomorrow, someone that is just being introduced to this could say, oh, you know what? In this situation, one of my best friends, he's an aerospace engineer. He did a lot of work last year at the Jet Propulsion Lab. And he said, yeah, we have situations where the type of fuel that we use, we analyze it same way that they did in 1955. And these are the kind of issues that can happen. And when we send things into space, there would be maybe some small changes you would make in terms of the shielding for the electronics, but that's standard. But it would solve a massive problem because small issues with the fuel can lead to very big issues with a space mission.
Interesting. So we've now got sort of the quantitative results. Qualitatively, it's feeling good, but also it's leading to the world now coming to you in a sense and saying, well, thanks. We heard about what you're doing. By the way, I've got this problem too. And the orbit that you're dealing with are what? High level executives in mining, folks in jet propulsion labs, people in universities. Like it's a really interesting orbit around actually the ability to get things done along with the investors behind you and really unlimited runway now that you've gotten through this first decade and change for how far this can go because of the nature of fluids
Yeah.
and that unlimited application. So shiny objects will be, I'm sure, your challenge in the future for all the different places you could apply this, but you're actually out there, you're doing the work. It's great. So we've heard, what the win is. We know we started off, we said we were in a harsh environment and we figured out and we applied and we showed that our solution works. You went through the strategy, work plan, people operations, and we heard some results along the way as well. And that's just fantastic. It's what an inspiring story and your attitude coming through in every sentence, your consistent optimism, you know what I mean? That ability to sort of make the thing go forward, that's come through as well. Well, it's just been so good to talk to you about this win. And I always ask, you've been leading your own company for a while. If you had a leader in front of you and you had a few sentences to kind of pass along to them for their own leadership learning, what's a few sentences that you give to them as we go out the door?
It's interesting. So what I would say is 10th man as much as possible. And so what I mean by that, within Fluid Insight, it's part of our corporate culture. 10th manning, it comes from something that happened in the military years and years ago. And as human beings, a lot of times we're a group. Bob thinks this, Sally thinks that. You're the third person. I guess I'll just go along. And that's a really, really natural thing. But I find, especially as a leader, uh, your power is more than positional. And so if things are happening just because you're in charge, then you're not really leveraging your group the way you should. So one of the things we often do within our team is we'll say, let's 10th man this. If 10 people in the room agree with something, we might be missing something really big. And so one person gets designated as the 10th man, and their job is to say, well, what if? And it's to really, really aggressively play devil's advocate with the entire idea of, if we all agree, there's a good chance that we might be missing something. Or, hey, maybe it's a great idea, but we do have to attack it so that we can think through things that might be missing. And so that's served us well. And it also helps the group get very comfortable with having disagreements. You need to have friction creatively. You need to have friction when it comes to optimizing things. If you don't and everything's fine, you become a large organization that really doesn't innovate. They just perpetuate. And there's a difference between those two mindsets.
That is an absolute gift. The 10th man concept. Create that devil's advocate in the situation to know that we're not in groupthink. We're not all sheep going along with something, because that can be a real vulnerability, especially when it comes to innovation. Wow. Yes. I wish we had that other 9 hours to talk to you, because now I'm starting to pry apart your brain and get these great insights that people can use. We learned about your win, Patrick. Thank you so much for being on the show.
This has been fantastic.
Be humble, work collaboratively, and be an irrationally optimistic entrepreneur who solves big problems and saves millions for their clients. That is how Patrick Emokpae and his team win every day. Thank you, Patrick, for your inspiring win. Now, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, then make sure to check out our upcoming episodes, which include how to lead a truck body manufacturing company through major changes to become more profitable. Winning with Scott Castles, president of General Body and Equipment. And if you are a leader who really wants to learn how the Executive Wins coaching session can help you to grow your confidence and inspire your team, then visit executivewins.com to learn how. You can also subscribe to the Executive Wins newsletter to stay up to date on the podcast, live events, education opportunities, and more. Visit executivewins.com/newsletter to sign up. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe, and share it with a fellow leader. And don't forget to check out our resources and links in the show notes. And keep listening to the Executive Wins podcast for more inspiring wins that will help you to grow yourself, your team, and your entire business. Thanks for listening to the Executive Wins podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe as we bring you more inspiring wins from outstanding leaders so you can grow your business.